speaking on behalf of People and Culture are Michelle Littlewood and Oliver Randall. Not Littlewood at all, little more. Yes, little more. Sorry. And at this point, then, I would like to ask Martin Paver. Martin, if you would like to kick off, that would be terrific.
Straight into schoolboy error of talking with the mute button on. There we go. That's a fantastic start. So in terms of the format, Hugo, it's 3 minutes of sort of introduction or 3 minutes pitch or both?
3 minutes pitch. By all means, do a sort of 30 seconds introduction. What I'll do is I will stick a timer up and I will start the timer. Just find my timer. There we are. I will start the timer at the point that you start actually arguing the case. So by all means, do a bit of an introduction to yourself, 30 seconds to a minute.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you. So my name is Martin Paver. I'm the Chief Exec of a company called Project and Success. I've been doing loads of work on project data analytics for the last 4 or 5 years. So we've founded the Project Data Analytics community. I'm the co-chair of the Project Data Analytics Task Force. We run the Project Data Analytics Academy, etc. So you can start now, Hugo. Off we go. So the problem is every project is different. That's the definition of a project. And that means we've got nothing to learn from the previous project because they're all different. And that's true in terms of the scope of the project and the exact specification of the project, but in terms of the way we do it, there's a lot of patterns in that sort of project delivery process. And that could be the functional patterns in terms of procurement, it could be in terms of the way that you've got the team dynamics, the way you integrate things. So there's a vast plume of data that comes out of the back of a project, and a lot of that data just evaporates. We're not really using that data at the moment, and we're not exploiting it. And that was fine a few years ago. We couldn't do this, but we've now got all these cloud services capabilities where we can start to capture this data. And it doesn't mean you've got to set up this massive on-premise service anymore, and you can put it all in the cloud. And we can now start to deploy all these algorithms out there, and a lot of these algorithms are free, so you can go and deploy them through things like Python, for instance, free of charge. All you need to know is the methodology to go and do it. So we all need to be trained in this stuff. So as project managers, we don't really understand these capabilities. We don't really understand the art of the possible. We don't really understand our data. We don't understand the quality of the data. We don't understand the insights we can get out of it. So what we need to do is to reinvent the way we deliver projects and start to reinvent the way we treat data on projects. That data tells us the predisposition to variance. It tells us where the risks are likely to emerge. It tells us where the problems are going to be on a project and the best way of resolving those problems. But part of the problem is today our data is not good enough. And it's not good enough because we don't value it. It's just this exhaust plume that comes out the back of a project. So if we can start to reinvent project delivery, so we do start to value this data, that's when we get to the pivot point, is saying, let's now start to work towards machine learning driven projects where we can now use all of that data and all of that insight so we can preempt what's going to go wrong. We can start to think about that data plume. It's not just your data plume inside of your organization, it's the end-to-end data plume which goes across the full supply chain as well. So if we start to reimagine that, we start to work a lot more collaboratively, a lot more collegiately, and we work together to really transform the profession. And this is no longer a vision, it's becoming reality, and we all need to adapt to it.
Thank you.
So that's my 3 minutes. Thank you.
3 minutes. Fantastic. That's an excellent flying start. We're beginning to get some comments in on the chat. So if we move across now to Michelle. Michelle, would you like to make the case for the human side, the non-artificial side?
Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Littlemore, and I'm a senior lecturer at Northumbria University on the MSc Project Management Programme. I come from a commercial background, commercial project management, where I've worked for Sam Gaban. However, I've changed over to the dark side of academia to join the MSc Project Management team in the Faculty of Engineering and Environment approximately 13 years ago. My research interests are in change management and the impact change has on behaviour and working practices, mainly in construction, but other project-based industries as well. And based on my research interests and my beliefs, today I'd like to propose that, in contrary to our previous speaker's proposal, that people and culture are the enablers and not technology of project success and project performance. So in the famous quote from Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast, or in this case, culture eats data processing for breakfast. Data processing is only as successful and useful as the culture in which it's embedded and the people who use it and interact with it. And as such, culture is the inherent values and beliefs of a person, the project and the organisation, and it's a centre of why people do what they do. Culture is the trigger for wanting to succeed. It's the glue that holds a team together to strive for better things and therefore success. Processes, on the other hand, are remote and detached and are a means to an end. And they don't take into consideration the human elements of project. The fact is, we are driven by forces greater than technology and processes. However, despite how important culture is to project success, less focus and time is given to understanding culture and its behaviours in projects and in organisation. And this is due to the fact that people and culture are not as malleable, tangible and measurable as data processing. And the fact that people and culture are such a complex phenomenon that project managers shy away from it or sweep it under the carpet or walk around it. So is it the case that what we can't see, measure, influence or implement can't really be that important? Well, no, because theory and research show that culture features in every aspect of a project. It exerts its influence on the decisions that were made, the way in which data is used, and the way in which risks that are taken during any of those processes. So finally, I'd like to conclude that culture overrides data processing when it comes to project success due to its inherent, intangible and embodied power to influence people's behaviour, and it's its people who are driving this process.
Thank you, Michelle.
The end.
Yep.
Before I run out of voice.
Stop button. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Michelle. So we've now got a voice from each side. I'd now like to ask Dan to follow up Martin's side, Martin's discussion on data, and to talk about to follow on with another talk on data. And if you'd like to introduce yourself first, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Dan Webber, currently work at Tribe 365. Tribe 365 helps build high performing teams through culture, funny enough, and data collection. I've got a background in the NHS. I spent about 15 years in the NHS in various projects, mainly around patient safety systems and clinical quality. And that's it for me introduction. Thanks Hugo, when you're ready to start the clock.
There goes.
So as I said, I worked in the NHS for a long time, and the NHS, if you don't know, is ran on the back of Excel spreadsheets. Everything that happens in the NHS has an Excel spreadsheet in it. And I think one of the things that I'm motivated by is frustration. And a lot of the projects I've worked on, I've just not understood why data hasn't been collected to help things move forward, to help things point in the right direction. And Martin's absolutely right about what he said before. If you've worked on a project and you've got all of this data and all of this experience, and at the end of it, nothing happens with it, then you've lost a massive opportunity, not just to learn about the project that's happened, but help drive forward improvements and anything else. So if you think about when you start a project and you've got the foundations, so you've got your people, you've got where you want to be, you've got your milestones. What's often missed is the measurements. So how we're going to measure where we're getting to, how we're going to measure the successes we have, and how we're going to factor in things that go wrong. Because I've seen that on many projects before. Unrealistic deadlines or deadlines that aren't going to be met because there's been no factor for error. And if you had good data collection and if you had good data analysts, then that could tell you a story almost before the page was turned. So it would indicate where things are going to go wrong. It would indicate where to stop doing things that are wrong. So you're not just sticking to your guns and trying things that aren't working. You're looking at the data to identify what's going to happen next through trends and statistics. And that should also drive every discussion that you have about that project. So data could include things like risk registers. It could be just how you measure time, how you improve on times. Everything you're looking at should be interpreted and discussed. Like I said, data should tell a story, and that's what you should be looking for. Like I say, I've been on many projects where things have fell apart because they haven't looked at the data correctly, or it hasn't been captured right. Or sometimes, you spend a lot of time trying to identify things and get the data right, but it's just not discussed. So everything that you capture should really motivate how you go forward with everything else. One of the things I think that is important about collecting data is that you have to have the right systems. And that could be, like I said, I'm joking about the Excel spreadsheets, but that could be what it is. But you've got to agree on that at the beginning, and you've got to make sure that the benchmarking at the beginning is the foundation for how you measure everything else.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Stop button, there's my stop button. Okay, the chat is beginning to hot up, and that's where a lot of the debate will happen, and that makes it very easy for me to pick out who we're going to call on next. Right now, we've got one of our panel leadership ready to speak, which is Oliver. Oliver, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Oliver. I don't have much to say about anything about myself, apart from I'm part of the People SIG in the APM. And I've been working, studying culture for the last four or 5 years. And one of the things that becomes very clear in all of this is, and I think when you're talking about culture, people have an idea of something quite broad, that actually culture's fairly simplistic. There are two real measures within that, and you think about direction. So the element of knowing what you're targeting and why you're doing it, okay? And then you have the other side, which is connection, the bond between people, trust, really. And I would argue that on any project, you're always going to have a culture. What you need to understand, so for example, in this room right now, why are we all here? What are we trying to achieve? And you think about that, and if I suggested, well, there are two sides to the APM and the vision or the purpose that the APM exists for, and one side is creating an environment where no project fails, fairly ambitious. And the other side is facilitating project management as a life skill for all. And you'd argue that potentially the activity we're doing right now is trying to help contribute to that environment where projects don't fail, that people can get in line, well, not even in line, but everyone can get onto the same wavelength and start contributing in the same way towards a fixed outcome. So when you think about any activity, any project, if you don't understand the culture, if you don't understand why people are there, what they're trying to achieve, how are you going to succeed? How are you going to do anything? So culture has to be the most important thing when you're considering projects. Otherwise, you can't even bring people together, start moving forward. So I would argue that culture is by far the most important thing when you start considering projects. But it's also understanding that there are various components within culture. You still have understanding how you do things within an environment. That's part of culture. So when you're talking about data, it will come underneath that same bracket, I would argue. So I don't know, I'll leave it there because I'm sure I've chucked up a few ideas. Is that fair enough?
That sounds fantastic.
Okay.
So within the chat, one of the noisiest, shall we say, is Duncan Ross-Russell. Duncan, you've made comments in both directions. Would you like to bring some of them to life?
Typical of you to accuse me of being noisy, Hugo. Yes, I mean, there's my conclusion I've sort of already made in one of the comments, which is that I suspect we're going to end up concluding here that these two are not two sides of the same coin that warrants a traditional debate. And the point that I was just typing there for Oliver is that you were presenting that case there, looking at the culture and data as being mutually exclusive, but are they really mutually exclusive? You've recognised the fact that there is that culture exists in every single project, and therefore culture is going to be there whether you like it or not. But just at the moment, the new kid on the block is data. And the new ability that we've not really had before is the ability to gather data, mine data, and to analyze data in ways that those of us who have been using Excel spreadsheets for many years and once thought they were the state of the art never dreamed was going to become possible in our own lifetimes. So I don't see this. I mean, I think it's great that we've put this together, this discussion together, but I don't see it as being a debate so much with two sides of the same thing. It's actually two things that go very much hand in hand. Where if we've got a right culture which is seeking to achieve and deliver the benefits that we're seeking for, one of the things that can really help us do that is intelligent analysis of the data that we've got available to us. And so we need to be pursuing both of these things. And I'm going to sit on the fence the whole way through.
I'll leave you sitting on the fence then for the moment. Roger, you're very much a culture person. This is Roger Martin. But also quite happy to weigh in there with your size 10s. Do give us a quick update on how you feel, where you feel data fits and where you feel culture fits, and whether you feel that one is more important than the other, perhaps.
Well, I agree that the explosion of data is really important, and we're on new ground with it, and it's welcome. But how we process that data and how we interpret that data is given by the culture. So you can have pieces of data that are so threatening to positions in the culture or to egos in the culture that it never gets discussed. And you can have other pieces of insights from, you could have other data that's really insightful about the culture's current practice that changes that culture. So I'm on the fence too. I think both are really vital. But my key point is, let's not confuse data as being the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's only the way it's interpreted that matters. The data in and of itself has to live in a cultural context for it to make any sense.
So we've got two Davids on the chat. One David McDonough, chair of the Northeast branch, and another David just listed as guest. So I'll have to distinguish you by calling you David without a name or David McDonough. David McDonough, you've agreed with every speaker so far. Would you like to expand on the things that you've agreed with and the line that you're having to draw to plot your own path on your own projects? Introduce yourself first and the projects you work on.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm David McDonough, the current Northeast Chair. I'd probably say that I'm torn between the two. I see both sides of the argument, so probably like Roger, I'm sitting on the fence, to be honest. I think data is definitely, a fundamental part of the process, but like others have said, without the culture to embed those processes and realize what the data is capable of achieving, then it's nothing. People make projects ultimately, not data. So data is driven by people, but again, without valid or accurate data, then you see fundamental flaws and failings in processes and project delivery. So the long and short is, Hugo, I'd say I'm sitting on the fence. I think they're both equally as valuable as each other, but you can't necessarily, there's a symbiotic relationship there, isn't there? You need one to have the other, and the work in harmony with each other.
So let's take this down a slightly different direction to say which aspects of culture and which aspects of data are the most likely to contribute to project success, because I think they are huge fields. So we're a little bit earlier than I planned. The chat's not quite as angry as it could be, but let's start this the other way around, and let's start
to disappoint.
with Oliver and say, would you take us down a particular aspect of culture that you believe is particularly important to project success?
That's a good question, Hugo. I think one of the main points is the simplicity of really understanding culture, and that's understanding why you're doing something in the first place. And I know there are lots of individuals who go around the world talking about whys, etc. But it's not as complex as I think it's made out to be. Really, it's just coming to the greatest reason you could be doing something. And it's not something that's so disconnected sometimes from what we're actually doing. I think a lot of organizations put up slogans that are probably detached from 99% of the workforce, yet they put them up there as this is our why. And I think it's a load of codswallop. That was a good word. But what it really needs to be is just the greatest sentiment you could be doing something. So if you took something like, the Newcastle football team, and you put up actually what it's about is regenerating the Northeast. And that's what we're really here to do. And that's what we believe in. If that was something the 11 players really bought into, you'd see that surge of purpose and alignment and actually contributing wholeheartedly to what they're doing. And that's where I'd suggest you start, is really understanding why people are doing anything. Like the question I asked, why are we all on this call? Are we all thinking, yes, we are contributing further to an environment where actually projects have an increased likelihood of success. And it's understanding that. And the one thing I would say around that is try and make it the greatest reason that actually is relevant to what you're doing, instead of these creative ones that maybe have no relevance to anyone whatsoever. Maybe.
Thank you very much, Oliver. I'll take us through the panelists again, and then I'm going to bring Merv in, because Merv's been jumping in at various points. So going back through the panelists, Dan, you're next. Which would you pick out one or two particular aspects of data that make the biggest contribution?
Yeah, I think I'm going to play this card now. How do we measure culture? You could argue it's almost a chicken and an egg situation here. So if we're trying to change a culture or make it better, how do we measure in the first place that it needs to be changed, or how do we measure that it is changing for the better? And Merv did ask a question about spreadsheets in the NHS, which felt like a trap, Merv. I'm not sure if it was, and I think he was trying to get us to say to change culture. It might not have been. I apologise if it wasn't, Merv. I'm just trying to heat things up a little bit. But I think one of the things about culture and data is, I'm going to concede that there does have to be a symbiotic relationship. But like I say, and probably a question for Michelle and Oliver, how do we measure the culture? How do we know the culture's right? That has to come from data, right?
Well, Michelle, you have a chance to answer that one.
Okay, well, I'll attempt to, and this isn't a get out clause or anything, but you're right, actually, and measuring culture is inherently awkward in that it's so intangible. Like I alluded to in the opening speech, is that it is very intangible, and that's why people shy away from it. It's a lack of understanding, and it's not understanding what culture is, and all the variables. And there are theoretical tools that can enable you to assess your culture. But I play it back to you as to what do you mean by measure? Are you quantifying it or qualifying it? And what do you want to do with it? You know, how are we going to manipulate that data? I mean, you can assess your culture, you can understand what needs to change within that culture, and then you can adapt that change process to which is ordinarily a long time in changing cultures. And then you can evaluate that to see where you've come from. But quantitatively in a data processing style, then yeah, we're not talking the same language, unfortunately.
Martin, you said you can hot things up. Let's see where we're going with that.
So in terms of culture, I've been listening, and to be honest, I think it's a bit fluffy. So I've worked on projects with toxic cultures, right? Really toxic cultures. And I've had project directors who's been all over me like a rash and trying to whip everybody, and goes and takes pleasure in going shooting somebody every week, and they lose their job as a contractor, whatever, right? So I've worked in those cultures. I've also worked in projects where the project manager's fantastic, right? Now, which of those really delivers? If the project manager's really fantastic and they're not whipping the team, then it means it's probably going slower than the team who's been whipped but is going to burn out. So what do you do to establish who's right, right? Everyone's different. We've all got different cultural approaches, and it's not us who's setting that cultural approach either. We work as part of a bigger organisation. And is that culture set by Boris Johnson and his flat refurbishment, or is that the sort of culture set inside of your project? So you don't work in a vacuum, you work in a bigger enterprise. And the only way you can work out if your culture is positive in terms of project performance characteristics is by measuring it and start to get some feedback loops in terms of when you're burning your team out, when you start to get friction in your team, if you're getting stakeholder management friction, etc. All of that is in your data if you put the right sensors out, and we don't do that today. We don't put the right probes out so we can understand this. It's all possible. There's people like Kelvin McGraw in sort of Australia who spent the last 3 or 4 years doing this. So it's all possible today. It's just we're not deploying it because people who say, culture is the thing we need to be deploying aren't using these tools because it's all huggy and sort of cultural centric approaches. And I think we need to move past that now and start to say we need evidence so we can enforce this change and start to drive a change across projects where we start to understand what the impact of different cultures are, different contracting approaches are, different ways of managing risk. It's not just culture, it's every single facet of a project. So hopefully that's warmed some things up a little bit.
Fantastic. Merv, I promised you to leap in at this point.
Yeah, the problem is I agree with every speaker so far, but it was really about the context, because I think it's very, very different if you're on a project that's very people focused, a transformation and by certain industry, to if you work in infrastructure or construction. And I think there's another real issue around who pays for the project. I think in terms of the public sector versus the private sector, I think there's a very different mentality that exists. And one other thing I might just put in there, I think also the kind of the drivers and the external circumstances. One really good example of that is typically if you tried to roll out home working to a large public sector organisation before COVID, you'd probably start to plan in terms of years, whereas HMRC in 3 weeks flat put laptops into the hands of 65,000 workers. So, you know, there's a significant, you know, it is possible to overcome a culture where the need for speed is great. So, yeah, that's my comments.
And Dan, you mentioned earlier that you work for a company called Tribe 365. Without being too salesy, can you explain how culture is measured and what you do with the results?
Yeah, don't worry, I'm a terrible salesman. So basically, there's an app that we use to measure culture within organisations, and I think the key to it is persistence. So we've got daily measures on there. It's because normally in organisations, well, typically the staff surveys and things sent out quarterly, annually. But we found that the key to measuring culture is persistence. So you're constantly measuring it all the time through live data. And that's through things like sentiment. So have you had a good day or not? Have you had a bad day? There are measures of culture through surveys as well through the app. And it's just interacting with other team members, giving things like kudos to when the organisation's values and beliefs, which are really key to measuring culture. And Oliver picked up on it before, where it's about that direction. So if everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing and believes in something, then that's where you start with your culture. That's where you have to start, and everyone has to be on that journey with you. And Tribe 365 helps measure that through the app. And again, it's just about the persistence, constant data, constantly knowing what's going on in your organisation's heart, really.
So both Duncan and Roger have said that the bit of culture that is most important is the bit you can't measure. Can I ask Duncan in at this point, and then I will ask Roger in immediately afterwards. You're on mute.
Yes, I'm not sure much to add to that, but the point, I think my frustration sometimes with data, I mean, well, let's start this the other way around. I really want to sort of echo some of the points that Martin's been making, and that, you know, the data side of the argument's been making, and that we must do better at capturing data, because if we don't capture it, we can't analyze it, we can't learn the lessons from it. So there's definitely something to be done there, and that, you know, that's an important part of this debate. But there's nothing more frustrating than working for an organization that is so KPI driven that you just end up with the perverse incentives of we're only worried about what we can measure. And that's where I use the tip of the iceberg analogy, because there is so much more that is so hard to measure. And Dan's just been talking there about what the ways that they've tried to do that, and that's quite interesting. But even then, I suspect you don't expose much more of the iceberg, a little bit more, but you know, not all of it. And what we have to realise is that project success has got a huge amount of cultural input. It has got much more. You know, even when talking about benefits and benefits management, it's not just setting up a few KPIs of this is what we want to do and we can measure all of this. What about all the much harder, much more subjective parts of success? We must stipulate those and make sure they're understood. Otherwise, that half our community never sees success in any of their projects. So it's recognising that if we over focus on the measurable, we only see a part of the picture, but at the moment we're missing the opportunity to focus on a huge amount of the measurable. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater with that comment.
Roger Martin.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Duncan. I think that's right. We can kill something dead with too many metrics sometimes. But if I go back to what Oliver was saying about higher purpose and the bond that comes from that, that's difficult to measure. I think one of the things that is really one area to focus on where I think measurement is really useful is how do we behave when things go wrong, when we differ, when we disagree, when we're up against it. It's in those moments on project teams. And by the way, Martin, we can look at culture not just at the Prime Minister's level, you know, we can look at culture in a team. We don't have to push it out there to be such a big, complex thing that we wash our hands of it and say, oh, sorry, I can't do anything about it because it's too big. Because you are a part of that culture in every team you're a member of. So we're all contributing to culture. We can cut it at any slice. But it's what happens when things go wrong, I think, is the real key. And is disagreement used as a fillip to innovation and new ways forward that we haven't thought of before? Or does it go down the route it often goes down in teams, which is a divisive route that either ends in a fight response, so you've got people vying against one another, or it goes underground and it becomes the elephant in the room that's never spoken about. And I think at moments of disagreement and toughness, the culture, I think, really comes to the fore, either as an enabling force or a disabling force.
So, Merv, you have a background in data as well. Without being too salesy, talk a little bit about how data contributes to making the right decisions in projects.
Well, I think an awful lot of it am I on? No, I'm not on mute. A lot of it comes back to high-level strategy, objectives, and goals. Only once you've worked out these and why you're doing something and what you want to achieve, a la what Oliver was saying, can you then work backwards from the benefits piece to the initiatives. So that gets you all the way back to, are we doing the right initiatives that will make a logical contribution to the objectives? And you can measure all these, so you can get into the position of variance where you expected to deliver a particular milestone. So your new operational hospital, it slips by a period of 6 months, and clearly you lose revenue in terms of private patients. So you want to know quite early on what's actually happening within delivery and upfront, because it's going to pass through to your measurements. There's a very simple example, but you can, in terms of what you're doing, be very clear on what your objectives are, what your benefits are, and then you can look at the impacts in terms of shift, whether that is a schedule overrun, a cost overrun, or other things. So I think once you've set up your delivery model, then that should be informed in terms of what's going on in the data.
Duncan Ross-Russell, I'm going to invite you back in. You started off by agreeing with everybody. Are you beginning to form some sort of streams as to particular aspects of each that are contributing more than other aspects? Or are you still of the view that it's everything?
I think I'm going to echo slightly what I said last time you called me in, which was I think just at the moment there is the opportunity. I refer to it as the new kid on the block, the opportunity to start gathering data in ways that we've not been able to gather data before, and persuading the people who control finance that that's an investment worth making. That is an important point to make, and that will help us all in those projects. But just at the same time, culture is an area where we also fail to properly look at. I sort of first came into this part of my career having left the forces just at the end of the 2007 recession hit. It came in, and any sort of team building exercises that you might have once done prior to setting up a project was all immediately removed, because it was all seen as soft, unnecessary, sort of just going out and having a few drinks together type activities, and that was a quick, easy win. But what we've done as a result is we've lost that opportunity to build culture, and I really struggle when I'm setting up new projects. And I try and say to the client, we need to build a project team here, and what I'd really like to do is take everyone away for 2 days. I know we're in COVID at the moment, so this is very difficult, but for 2 days of it's not really, I don't call it team building, but effectively that's what it is, of sitting down, looking at what the project objectives are, defining what benefit looks like, defining what it looks like for every stakeholder, really getting people to get their head around that. And of course, we're doing it in a hotel environment with a few beers in the evening and the rest of it, and it starts to build the team, it starts to build the culture. And one of the key things you do in that, quite often, is say put a the words just got out of my head, but a sort of manifesto together for the project team. What is the environment we want to look at? And we've lost that as well. So just at the minute with these two subjects that we're debating, there's actually a key piece, one which is as a result of a new opportunity, that is the new technology allowing us to gather data in a way that is not getting funded, and the other is something that we have done in the past but we've rather lost focus on, is that importance of building the team in the early days, and both of them are ultimately driven by the client not recognizing that this is something worth investing in. And funnily enough, I suspect is data that will demonstrate to us that the other one is needed.
And Martin has done exactly that. Martin's posted in chat. All I can see is the headline: Crossrail Limited culture criticised in London Assembly report. Martin, Martin Paver, would you like to expand on posting that and on its particular importance within this debate?
In terms of Crossrail, right, they came along to our meetup in August 2018, and they were the poster childs, right? They were going around and fantastic job. They were all on target, massive project, and they're going around the world. We set up Crossrail International to go and sell all these capabilities worldwide, because they were doing a fantastic job and really focused on delivery culture. I've got all the slides from that presentation, and brilliant job. And then the next month it all went pear-shaped, and it went pear-shaped. And if you read the results of it, it's because it was this delivery culture all focused around hitting milestones, etc., etc. And then the loads of stuff were just swept to one side, right, and buried. All these buried bodies. If we can use data science, it starts to say to us that although this part's wrong, you're building up a load of pressure over here and it's going to pop, right? So you look at it as a enterprise, you're not looking at the things that you're just measuring. And back to Duncan's point about KPIs, if you just drive it on a KPI basis, that's proper old school now. We don't just pick out random parameters and measure random parameters. It's a bit like the NHS. If you start to measure those random parameters, that's what you get, right? And then you start to get all these perverse incentives about, waiting list growing because, you've said, I'm going to judge doctors on X, Y, Z. We need to look at it as a system. And what machine learning does for us, it enables us to understand those features as part of a system which are most dominant. And those features will differ if you're in the startup phase of a project or the close down phase of a project. They're not set KPIs, right? They are dynamic. And that's what this enables us to do, is to pull out these dynamic features. And we're not there yet. Somebody posted before, can we demonstrate all this? And it's like, no, not yet, because, it's really hard, some of this. We need a lot of data and we need a lot of projects to support it. But people like Mplan, for instance, have got 300, 400, 500,000 schedules now. So there are people who are starting to get under the skin of this. And we're not there yet. We're not fully sorted with all this, but it's definitely going in the right direction. It's going at pace.
Roger, you've posted that we only ever hear about culture when it's a problem. I'm just as a warning to the panelists, I'm about to ask you to argue the opposite point of view, but I'll give you some context. Roger, can you expand a little bit on successful cultures and why we don't hear about it when the culture is successful?
Well, it just seems to me that every independent investigation into corporate failure, whether it was the Stafford Hospital, the Carillion debacle, as Martin's just posted, Crossrail and others, all those independent investigators talk about a culture of fear, a culture of indifference, culture of blame, a culture of fear or what have you. So, and that they've either created or presided over. The interesting thing about the director's response to that independent investigation in my world is they're often surprised. Now, you could say that's willful blindness, like they're trying to pull the wool over the eyes of the investigators. What? Not me, Gov, right? But you could also take them at their word and think, well, yes, they are genuinely surprised. And one of the characteristics of culture is it's like a fish swimming in water. You take the water for granted. You don't know the culture is as toxic as you think it is because you're swimming in it every day. And so that it just seems to me that culture often comes up as a way of summarizing failure, but it never really comes up as a way of underpinning successful stories, you know, like Apple versus Microsoft and Netflix. That, you know, the culture in Netflix, for example, is meant to be exemplary, and that's rarely put down to this all-embracing phenomenon that we refer to as culture.
It reminds me of the lean story, the Toyota story, where people have tried to take lean and implement it, and they've implemented the activities and then wonder why it doesn't work because they haven't implemented the philosophy. I fired an early warning for the speakers. So, Michelle, would you like to explain to us or talk a little bit about what data you would need to ensure that you can manage and make culture more successful?
Sorry, Hugo, I lost the words there. Can you just repeat that?
Yes, what data you would be looking for and need in order to make culture more successful?
I think, well, like I alluded to before, it's I'm a bit averse to the word data, but yeah, and I suppose you can't ignore it. But I think if you evaluate all these, there are different fundamental factors that you can assess, as I said, mentioned before, to improve culture, and that's looking at it from a broader perspective. So if you're looking at its heritage, its history of the company or the organisation or the project, looking at where it is, where it's going, talking to people, creating these teams, and alluding to something that Roger was talking about was about being aware of the context in which you're being set. Someone else always said that as well, about it's not always about the it could be the industry. I think it was Merv that said culture is different in different industries. And if we look at the way that communication, for example, is a good one of analysing data with each other, and Oliver will be able to elaborate on that because that's his bag. But yeah, looking at how people communicate, how people interact, stakeholder management. That's if we're talking data, that's the sort of hard facts that you sort of can manage. But yeah, it's an ongoing thing. A culture is just not explored, and I've put that in the chat. You know, that we can't just pass it by because we've never addressed it in the first place, and so we still don't know how to manage that from a data analytical perspective, I think is what I'm trying to say. So maybe Oliver can just expand on the communication side of things.
Fantastic. I will certainly ask Oliver. I'm going to go to Martin first and say, what culture would you want in place in order to strengthen your data collection? You talked about this earlier.
Yeah, it's about evidence driven, right? So about 3 or 4 months ago, so it was New Year's Eve, Brent Flouvier sort of published a blog on LinkedIn that says, as project professionals, we're predispositioned to this strategic representation, he calls it, which is like fibbing or lying, right? So he says that you put a business case together under entryism and you start to pull together a proposition that is viable, not necessarily a proposition that is deliverable, right? So, and basically a load of people did this as part of Muskrat Falls. And now they're in the dock because they've said they've wasted so much taxpayers' money that they're now exposed to claims of fraud and strategic misrepresentation, etc. So I believe that the culture for project managers will be that is no longer acceptable. All right, so that sort of approach is no longer acceptable. And as a chartered project professional, I signed this piece of paper, you know, as part of the APM to say I've got values, I've got ethics, all these sort of stuff. But if you look back over all the records, when you're under pressure, you know, a lot of people compromise those. And I've walked off jobs where that's been the case, you know, where somebody said to me, you've got to deliver this, Martin, for this amount of money. I said, I just can't do it. And I've walked away from the job. And somebody's coming after me, and they've stayed in that job and tried to see it through up until the point of cancellation, right? Everybody's got a different tolerance to that sort of acceptance of that culture and that attitude. So it's not a culture inside the project team, it's a culture of the ecosystem. And what we start to do through data is data demonstrates that that project is not deliverable for that envelope, right? Now, if you've got some secret sauce where you can bring it back in, then fantastic. Let's do it through a evidence-driven approach. Just try and do it by bringing in a gung-ho project manager who's going to fix it because this time's different, and they've got some secret sauce on a culture, is not going to fix it. You know, it's just more of the same. So we need to change this concept of we've got to deliver projects at all cost. And I think the evidence drives that first and foremost, and enables you to go back to your boss and say, boss, I can't do it, which enables them to adjust their culture. So I keep coming back to the fact that projects do not have a culture of themselves. They're part of a bigger ecosystem. And my post was about Elon Musk versus, you know, a public sector culture. Elon Musk would never survive in a public sector, and he's really transformed NASA and things like that, you know.
Yeah, I'd certainly dispute that. I think, as you say, he's transformed NASA. Well, NASA is a public sector organization. I have seen many different cultures within the NHS as an example, some of which are toxic, some of which are extremely inspiring, and the sheer fact that there is such a contrast. But I personally believe that it's down to the size of the organisation to some extent how much flexibility there is, and public sector organisations are often larger. But that's kind of beside the point. I think there's room for everything. I did promise Oliver the chance to talk about what data would be needed to help you manage and improve culture, and then I'd like to ask Dan to talk about what culture you want in place in order to optimize your collection of data, use of data, I should say.
Thank you, Hugo. So just carrying on a little from what Martin was saying there, I don't know if you're inferring this, but finding balance, I would say, is very important within everything we're all doing. You know, and we've all seen that no more evident than the last year. But if you're talking about bringing measurement into culture, what would be so essential for me? And sorry, Michelle, to take this to probably an overly simplistic area, but all I'd be pushing for is knowing how happy people are and whether they're happy or they're not happy. So if there was something going out on a daily basis, just telling me if people are happy. And I'd be doing that as frequently as was possible. Because if I know how happy people are, what that tells me is within culture, you've already heard I have this real strong belief that if we're doing things we truly believe in, well, guess what? There's an elation there that you're contributing towards that. You're saving lives. You're out there protecting the country. Whatever you're doing, that brings that happiness. That brings something inside you. So by asking that question, what you cover off, if people are saying, yeah, I'm happy, well, that means things are probably in a good place. You know, they believe in what they're doing. They're doing it the way they would imagine it should be done. They've got good balance in family and work life. And it just tells you a lot just from saying you're happy. Now, if you're not happy, yes, that brings on a few more questions. But yeah, if I was going in really looking at culture, that's all I need to know is how happy people are. And I'm not saying grade it on 1 to 10. I don't care about that. You're either happy or you're not. And anything other than being happy, it needs to be worked on.
Thank you very much. Over to Dan to talk about the culture you need to optimize the use of data and data analytics.
Thanks, Hugo. Well, I think if you're going to get anything out of anyone, I think it has to be honest. And I think the promotion of an honest organisation, and I say honest, and I think a lot of organisations thinks they promote honesty, but they don't, and because they don't want to hear bad things about themselves. And I think that's absolutely vital. You've got to start listening to bad things about yourself, because that's the only way you're going to learn before it's too late. We've already discussed in the clips that Martin's put on things that have got organisations think they've got everything under control, but they don't know what's going on in their organisations, and then something happens and it just ends everything. So you have to allow people to be honest. And what I mean by that is you have to give them the voice, but you also have to listen to it and accept it without being too critical, without being too defensive. You have to allow people to be honest in the organisation, because that's the only way you're going to know anything about your organisation or your project. Otherwise, the data is just pointless.
So we've reached the end of the hour. So those people who need to leave at 6 o'clock, by all means, leave. I feel that the debate is far from over. I would like to continue to call people to debate, but I will understand if some people need to leave now. With some of the people who haven't commented, the only way I can easily bring you in is to know that you want to comment, which you do by writing something in chat. I would certainly like to bring in Duncan again at this point and ask how you feel it's going. Do you feel that we're beginning to draw on the best aspects of data and the best aspects of culture, or do you feel there's still a bit of a dichotomy, one to the other?
Thank you for that, Hugo. I do think we're coming together to a point, because I think the point we're meeting is recognising that there is a central element to culture in all teams, and culture is something that we should never forget. And maintaining that culture as a key piece of leadership. That I think was an Elon Musk quote that someone's put up there. What was that one? No, Edgar Shen, how's that pronounced? The only thing of real importance that leaders can do is create and manage culture. I think that's a really interesting thought that Roger shared there. And so to me, I'm beginning to realise if I've got to sort of vote between culture and data, that in the project environment, culture does come first. I can run a successful project around managing the culture without measuring the data, but I can't guarantee to run a successful project by simply measuring the data. But I can if I then implement the results of measuring and analysing that data, because it will point me back to culture. So if I'm forced to sit one side, I'm falling off the fence onto the culture side.
but still firmly on the fence if you can. Can be.
Jeremy Corbyn taught us a few tricks.
Merv, would you like to round that out a bit?
You've caught me on the hop there, Hugo, so I'll pass on that one if I may.
No problem at all. Roger, never lost for words.
Thank you, Hugo. Such lovely backhanded compliments are always welcome. What would you like me to respond to?
To round out on what Duncan's been saying about he believes we're beginning to come down on a particular side, whereas the question I'd asked him was did he feel that we were drawing strands from data and strands from culture, which between them could we elucidate some of the strands that we're beginning to draw out?
Yeah, I mean, my first comment in the chat was that this is a false dichotomy. We need both. We need data, and I agree with Oliver's suggestion of something simple that gives you a pulse of where people are at emotionally. Ultimately, if you look at the academic literature from people like Ed Shine, culture boils down to an emotion. It boils down to I feel like I belong here, I feel like I've got purpose here. And if we've got a gauge on that through data processing, the work that Paul McGrath, you mentioned, Martin, has been doing in Australia, if you can get a pulse on that, it, from a project management point of view, it tells you where you're exposed and where things are going well and what should be drawing your attention. So I'm all for data.